Hello. On Wednesday, July 26th, I was privileged to give a speech at OCON 2019 in Cleveland, Ohio. I asked the audience, who would like to see more objectivists in the world? They applauded, and I answered, me too. Here is my speech. Some people say objectivism is a hard philosophy, but to keep it simple, I say objectivism is 3 R's: reality, reason, and rational self-interest. It's not only the philosophers who want to see freedom rising in the world. No, freedom rising is a vision for us all. I'm here today thanks to Ayn Rand, Frank O'Connor, and the Ayn Rand Institute. Thanks also to Jean Maroney and the members of the Objectivist Voices Toastmasters Club. Our goal is to talk to lots of people about objectivism. Our goal is to make objectivism mainstream. How? By building on the natural synergy between the self-actualizing philosophy of objectivism and the lifelong public speaking and leadership training of Toastmasters. Is it ambitious? Certainly, using Toastmasters training to speak with poise and passion to the world about objectivism. Is it realistic? Will we ever see our vision of this objectivist future world? Well, I'm seeing it now, here at OCON. Toastmasters help each other become better public speakers and leaders. In my Sarasota club, we do themed meetings. The meeting announcement goes out with a different picture each week. One week, the picture was bleak. Jagged gray mountain peaks like fingers pointing to a cold gray sky. Words of warning said, life mission, don't be afraid to fail. Be afraid not to try. That theme was a challenge. I'm the only objectivist in my Sarasota club. Suddenly, I found myself on the road to forming the first objectivism-themed online Toastmasters club, Objectivist Voices. But before I tell you my Toastmasters story, I want to share my objectivist story. My story starts with a blind vision. In 1903, the pogroms against the Jews of Eastern Europe had killed hundreds and injured thousands. My great-grandmother, a Jewish peasant, lived in Romania. She was blind. In her mind's eye, this blind woman saw a dark future and heard the promise of freedom in the West. That was all she had, and she acted on it. Her 2 sons were already in America. She sent her daughter to join them. That girl was 15, lively and beautiful. That girl would become my grandmother. I learned my grandmother's story when I was 12. I thought my grandmother was very brave to come to America alone. Over the years, I began to think more about my great-grandmother's blind vision. It seemed enormously important, but I didn't know why. Most people would say my great-grandmother sacrificed her life to save her daughter. Years later, objectivism taught me that my great-grandmother was immensely rational in the face of fearful danger and had the intelligence, determination, and integrity to send her daughter on the journey to America when she could not go. It was not a sacrifice. I had no way to think about it until I found objectivism, and no way to talk about it until I found Toastmasters. How many of you have heard of Toastmasters? You may not realize that Toastmasters was founded in 1924, is active in 143 countries with over 16,000 clubs and 357,000 memberships. Now, getting back to my story, I thought my grandmother was brave, but I wasn't taught about real life heroes in terms of business and earning a living, or as we might say now, human flourishing. Heroes to me were pretend. Superman was a hero, but he wasn't real. Mighty Mouse was a hero, but he was a cartoon. I didn't think of everyday people as heroes, or even athletes, firemen, or policemen as heroes. Heroes in my world were not part of real life. That changed when I witnessed my first real life heroic act. In the spring of 1962, I was 15. My mother, my younger sister, my sister's friend, and I were traveling by Greyhound bus from New York to Florida. In Baltimore, I saw the first signs of segregation, separate bathrooms and water fountains. I had never been to the South before, and my mother explained it to me. In North Carolina, the bus stopped on the road, and a bunch of people, white and black, got on. They all found seats except a young black soldier in uniform. The bus started to move again, and the soldier was standing in the aisle. My mother looked around the bus. Then she whispered to me, "Don't make a fuss." She stood up and walked up the aisle to an older man traveling alone. The seat next to this man had a big bird cage on it. My mother spoke in a strong, firm voice, not too loud, but loud enough to stop all the conversation on the bus. "Sir, if you will put this bird cage on the overhead rack, this girl will be able to sit next to you, and this soldier will be able to sit next to my own daughter, who is 11. No one on the bus said a word. The man with the bird cage stood up to move the bird cage, and another man helped him. Then my sister's friend sat down where the bird cage had been, and the men retook their seats. The soldier sat next to my sister. Conversation resumed. I thought my mother was very brave, but I didn't yet know that her bravery demonstrated an important virtue, integrity. In Objectivism, we know integrity as loyalty in actions to one's convictions and values. My mother had stepped up. In Toastmasters, stepping up to responsibility is called leadership, and it's a good thing. I admired my mother's bravery, but I didn't know she demonstrated leadership. Leadership in Toastmasters starts with being a leader to yourself and helping other Toastmasters do the same. Every leadership role requires speaking to, for, and with people. To summarize, Toastmasters leadership training is a proven method that encourages personal growth with an implicit win-win philosophy. When I was 16, I used my own implicit philosophy to get into a college-type seminar class in my high school. I was an awkward teenager. I'm sure you've heard of Toys R Us. I was so introverted that my nickname could have been Shy M.I. I lived mostly in my own head. The class was to start next September. To be accepted, each student had to write a paper about problems facing man today. In those days, major problems were the atomic age, man versus machine, a cure for cancer. What should I write about? I vowed to ask the wisest person I knew. When I got home, the wisest person was in the kitchen reading the paper. I blurted out, "Dad, what's the greatest problem facing mankind today?" He looked up, he leaned forward in his chair, and he said, "The major problem facing man today is that he cannot face it." This answer was so direct and true, I was speechless. I didn't ask him any more questions because I knew that my father would only say, "Well, what does that answer mean to you?" I hurried to my room to figure it out for myself. 2 seconds later, I knew I could not possibly figure it out for myself, but I could write a fanciful story about this incident. So that's what I did. Here are 3 excerpts from my fanciful one-page story. The best way to face a problem is to think. The girl imagined herself as a knight on the white steed of truth. A problem must be recognized for what it is. Other kids were handing in thick reports on subjects they researched. I made a decision. I didn't know anything about solving world problems, and I was too lazy to pretend that I did. 1 page would have to do it. My father's answer was perfect in 2 ways. First, it satisfied my lazy bone, but more importantly, he encouraged me to think for myself and think about my own thinking. At that time, I thought thinking for myself was a good thing. I thought it was important. I didn't know why until I found Objectivism. I thought thinking about my own thoughts, I enjoyed thinking about my own thoughts, but I didn't know that thinking about one's own thoughts was called introspection, or why introspection is important, until I found Objectivism. I didn't know how to share my thinking with people until I found Toastmasters. Toastmasters training fosters introspection and communicating about introspection. Especially exciting is the newly updated mentoring component, which I will talk more about shortly. But first, I bet you can guess what flipped my muddled thinking from confusion to clarity. Atlas shrugged. Growing up, I was a hungry reader, voracious. I read everything very fast all the time. When I was 19, I remarked to my father that I had nothing to read. I had just finished The Hobbit and The Lord of the Rings trilogy. He went into his office and came back with a huge book. He said, "Here's a book by a crazy Russian lady you might enjoy." The book was Atlas Shrugged. It was a strange book from the first sentence. Who is John Galt? It was a disturbing scene of decay and unease. The character, Eddie Willers, seemed muddled. He thinks of pieces of ideas, but can't remember the whole idea. On the second page, when I read, he saw a bus turning the corner expertly steered, he wondered why he felt reassured. I stopped. What was going on? Why don't I understand this? Why should I care about expertly steered? If I don't pay attention, I'm going to miss out. I started over. I went back to the first page and reread from the beginning, "Who is John Galt?" And I said to myself, I don't know. I read every word and thought about every sentence slowly and carefully. When I got to James Taggart's first words, "Don't bother me, don't bother me, don't bother me," I stopped again. This is a man that won't face reality. Is he a hero or an anti-hero? I loved Dagny. I loved her legs, her clothes, her jobs, her fearlessness, and her love for sex. For me, there has never been a more perfect hero in all of literature. Dagny's struggles proved to me she was steadfast in her moral courage to face a reality she didn't understand. At each turn of the page, I thrilled to find out what she would do next. But soon it became more than Dagny, because Dagny's world was falling apart. I started asking different questions. I knew from the advanced seminar in high school and from college that all the proposed solutions I had heard in my 19 years were dead end. But Atlas Shrugged was not presenting hopelessness. It was hopeful, uplifting, thrilling. Francisco's money speech was an eye-opener. The interaction between Francisco and Reardon, looking out at the frozen plain, underscored the importance of money in concrete terms. I asked myself, if this is true for the novel, and it sounds true, what does it mean for the world? By the time I got to Galt's speech, my focus had changed a third time. Instead of asking myself about the characters or the world, I was getting closer to the core. What does all this mean for me, for my life? I seem to have built up hundreds of questions in the form of, if this is true, then this would also be true, and maybe such and so is probably true too. It was a mountain of ifs. I had never experienced this in any other book. What does it mean for my life? The answer came on page 1016, when John Galt gets to bedrock. A is a thing is itself, existence is identity, consciousness is identification. I knew what it meant for my life, everything. And I knew it would take years for me to figure out what everything meant. I remember seeing in my mind's eye the vision of a great stainless steel vault swinging open, revealing a green meadow under a blue sky. I walked out of my 19-year prison of confusion and into the clear sunlight. I never looked back. Every objectivist has a story of transformation, and that is mine. But I have something more to add to this story. In 1968, I had a chance to meet Ayn Rand. I was 21, married, and still shy Ilene. We went to a dance at the Nathaniel Branden Institute in the basement of the Empire State Building. Ayn Rand was there. My husband wanted to meet her. He wanted me to go with him. I couldn't do it. I would be too tongue-tied and stupid. I was young. I thought I had all the time in the world. After about 20 minutes, my husband came back very happy. He had had a very nice conversation. He said that Ayn Rand was gracious and pleasant, and that he also met Frank O'Connor, who was very nice as well. Wait right here, he said. 2 minutes later, he came back with Frank O'Connor. I was more embarrassed than ever because I was so shy that Frank O'Connor had to come to me because I wouldn't go to meet him. But then Frank O'Connor smiled I looked into his eyes, and now I am quoting from Atlas Shrugged. He looked as if his faculty of sight were his best loved tool, and its exercise were a limitless, joyous adventure, as if his eyes imparted a superlative value to himself and to the world, to himself for his ability to see, to the world for being a place so equally worth seeing. That was my vision of Frank O'Connor, and I knew, without a doubt, that the sense of life and the philosophy she called Objectivism that Ayn Rand brought into the world was the child of her love for Frank O'Connor. Fast forward 50 plus years, December 2017, the start of my Toastmasters journey. My journey started with a call to action. I had written a book. To promote it, my book buddies said, "Ilene, you've got to get out and talk to people. Join Toastmasters." Okay. In February, Sarasota Speakers Exchange welcomed me. The building was drab and gray, but the people had a positive attitude about adding meaning and joy to their lives. The meeting was structured fun. I learned that clarity, eye contact, gestures, movement, vocal variety, and audience awareness were all elements to speaking to the world with poise and passion. My goal was to learn to be a better speaker. I thought, big lesson, I can learn how to talk to people. It takes practice. My goals match my fellow Toastmasters goals, value for value. That's the trader principle. All of us will learn to be better with practice. In Toastmasters, prepared speeches are evaluated. Another lesson, the most difficult and important aspects of Toastmasters training is focused listening, learning how to give evaluations and take them. The choice to focus is the fundamental virtue of Objectivism. I started to tell people about Toastmasters. Goal setting, organizing, stepping up to challenges were part of Toastmasters leadership training. Shortly after I joined, Toastmasters International rolled out their new training system called Pathways. I thought of my great-grandmother and chose visionary communications. Headed to OCON in 2018, I posted on Facebook, "Any Toastmasters coming to OCON this year?" Enthusiastic response, "We ought to run a demo meeting." Another challenge, step up, get a room, get a time, get the word out. Summer at OCON in Newport Beach, we had the demo meeting. We had prepared speeches, impromptu speeches, and evaluations. 28 people showed up. It was a blast. Yet another big lesson learned. Success doesn't breed success. Success opens the door to new challenges. Only action breeds success. The autumn brought challenge, disaster, success. The challenge, opportunity to form a new online Toastmasters club. The disaster, broken leg. I went on a fall trip and had a trip and fall. Flat on my back after the operation and interrupted by the therapist while very busy feeling sorry for myself. "Can you bend your knee?" "No." "Can you push your knee down into the mattress?" "Yes." "Good, do that." Suddenly, the implicit principle behind Toastmasters became clear, and it clarified the synergy between Toastmasters and Objectivism. To live requires action. To live the moral life, you start with the principles of objectivism, but you must take action, moral action. My great-grandmother's devotion to freedom, my mother's leadership in the face of prejudice, my father's wisdom in a world beset with problems, Dagny's fearlessness, and Ayn Rand's love became explicit. What you can't do never matters. Only two things matter: that your action is moral and you do what you can. Objectivist Voices Toastmasters Club was chartered December 2018 and is chugging along, meeting twice a month online, doing what we can. I am a philosophy activist. My life mission is to speak to the world. My boot camp and training ground has been Sarasota Speakers Exchange. I joined 16 months ago. I am a toddler Toastmaster. Toastmasters training includes both coaches and mentors and clearly defines the difference. A coach gives specific instructions to complete a particular task or goal. A mentor is a concerned guide who practices focused listening, asking gentle questions to help the person seeking guidance to find his or her own meaning, goals, and tasks by introspection. I gave a speech in Objectivist Voices that talked about the importance of introspection for objectivists and the role of mentors and introspection in Toastmasters. After my speech, someone in the audience asked if I could mentor him. I did. It was a challenge and a joy. Since then, I've talked with other people as a mentor, both formally and informally. Speaking here in a room of objectivists, think back to the picture of the jagged gray peaks. If you're reluctant to try, afraid of making a mistake, find a mentor who, by focused listening, can help you find the power within yourself to pursue your highest values. Look now, the jagged peaks are still there. That's the challenge. But the cold gray clouds are breaking up, and we can see patches of clear blue sky. The life mission is changing before our eyes. Find the moral power within yourself to do what you can. My goal is not to proselytize objectivism. My goal is to share the joy of living that objectivism has brought to my life. If I can mentor objectivists who want to be Toastmasters and mentor Toastmasters who want to know more about objectivism, that will be a joy. If I can mentor people who are not sure and help them find their own clarity, that will also be a joy. And if I can mentor the mentors, that will be more than a joy. It will be a step forward on the great goal of making objectivism mainstream. Objectivist Movement 2.0. I'm ready. Are you ready? Let's take this journey together.